Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. Our today's session is our last session on the novel Tess of the D'Urbervilles that covers phase 7 of the novel titled as The Fulfillment. As a matter of fact, this is our last session of the current course as well. Before I move forward, I would just like to share a quick review of the previous lesson. We started phase 6, the convert, in the previous session. We covered chapters 45 to 52 and finished phase 6. In doing so, we covered the following aspects. We explored the text of these chapters, we explored related themes, we discussed the development of characters, and we critically analyzed the selected parts of text. As far as today's session is concerned, we will start phase 7, that is titled as The Fulfillment. We will cover chapters 52 to 59 and would inshallah finish this phase. Since this is the last phase of the novel, we would thus finish the novel and we would end it today. By completing this novel, we would also inshallah be able to complete our course for the current course on the English novel. So here I start with some text from the first chapter of phase 7, that is titled as The Fulfillment. Overall, this is chapter 53 of the novel, and the selected part of the text is about Angel's condition. Angel has, if you remember, he has started realizing that he did wrong to Tess, so now he decides to come back home. This is a scene where he comes back to his family. As his mother sees her, this scene shows her reaction. "Oh, my boy, home again at last," cried Mrs. Clare, who cared no more at that moment for the stains of heterodoxy which had caused all this separation than for the dust upon his clothes. What woman, indeed, among the most faithful adherents of the truth, believes the promises and threats of the world in the sense of which she believes in her own children, or would not throw her theology to the wind if weighed against their happiness? As soon as they reached the room where the candles were lighted, she looked at his face. "Oh, it is not Angel, not my son, the angel who went away," she cried in all the irony of sorrow as she turned herself aside. His father too was shocked to see him. So reduced was that figure from its former contours by worry and the bad season that Clare had experienced, in the climate to which he had so rashly hurried in his first aversion to the mockery of events at home. You could see the skeleton. So the text continues, keeps on telling the hardships that Angel has faced during his stay at Brazil. As far as this chapter, that is chapter 53, is concerned, let's see what else happens in this chapter. We have seen that Angel returns to his parents' home. Both his parents have been waiting for his return, but when their son comes back, they see and they are shocked to see him. Mrs. Clare is shocked to see him as he appears to be very, very weak, sick and pale. He is completely haggard and gaunt after his tribulations in Brazil. He reads Tess's angry letter and he worries that she will never forgive him. When his mother finds his worrying about Tess, she criticizes him that he should not worry about the opinions of a poor commoner who is a girl of soil. Now please notice the snobbery in the attitude of the mother. She thinks of Tess as a girl from low status, and she criticizes her son Angel for being worried about such a girl. Angel reveals to her Tess's exalted lineage in response to this. Once again, like earlier, we notice him defending the honor of Tess. So far we have seen again and again, at every time point, Tess honoring him, respecting him, believing in him, following him and loving him unconditionally. There were some points, however, where we saw Angel taking care of her pride. Here again we see that. Before their marriage, we saw Angel taking care and defending the honor of Tess, and now again we see him doing the same. This shows that he too has some love for Tess. This is the part of the text that is actually a response to the letter of Tess. "It is quite true," said Angel, throwing down the letter. "Perhaps she will never be reconciled to me." "Don't, Angel, be so anxious about a mere child of the soil," said his mother. "Child of the soil? Well, we all are children of the soil. I wish she were so in the sense you mean. But let me now explain to you what I have never explained before, that her father is a descendant in the male line of one of the oldest Norman houses, like a good many others who lead obscure agricultural lives in our villages and are dubbed sons of the soil." So he reveals about the ancestors of Tess and tries to defend her honor in front of his own mother. He spends a few days at home to recover from his illness. Then he writes a letter to Tess addressed to Marlott, the place of birth of Marlott, where she used to live with her family earlier. After a few days, he receives a reply from Tess's mother informing him that they have left Marlott and they have gone to a new place. She also informs him that Tess is no longer with the family and that she does not know when Tess will return. Well, here I have the text of the letter of Tess's mother that she wrote to Angel telling about Tess. "Sir, J write these few lines to say that my daughter is away from me at present and J am not sure when she will return. But J will let you know as soon as she go. J don't feel at liberty to tell you where she is temporarily bidding. J should tell that me and my family have left Marlott for some time. Yours, J. Derbyfield." So he is informed that she is no more living with the family right now. The chapter continues. Angel decides to wait for another letter, but then rereads an earlier letter that is written by Tess, in which she claims that she would die for him and pleaded him to come back. If you remember that very emotional letter that she wrote, now he is reading that once again. After reading that, he decides to find Tess and decides that he must not delay his reunion with Tess. He also comes to know that Tess did not use his money and did not ask his parents for financial help. This even strengthens his plan to immediately go and find Tess, because he realizes that she must have been suffering poverty and she must have been caught up in very difficult circumstances. In fact, he is overcome with pity and guilt. Pity for the poor girl and her hardships that she faces, and guilt for what he has done to her. Angel's parents finally guess the secret cause of their son's estrangement from Tess and find that the knowledge disposes them to feel more kindly towards their daughter-in-law. Just before Angel leaves, he receives the letter from Marion, and Is, that you saw was towards the end of the previous phase, written by Is and Marion to persuade Angel to return to Tess, claiming that Tess loved him very much. This begins us to some important discussion points. Several letters that Tess wrote to Angel during his separation from Tess play a critical role in making Angel start searching for her once he returns from Brazil. We need to notice Angel's confusion. He is not sure whether she will accept him or not, now that he has returned after such a long time. In terms of plot, it is important to notice that though Angel wants a reunion with her, Tess's last letter indicates that maybe now she would not be interested in this reunion. This conflict adds to the suspense of the story, and as we are doing the last phase, we as readers wonder what would happen next. This brings us to chapter 54 of the novel, and what we see in this is that Angel sets out to find his wife, traveling through the farm at Flintcomb Ash and through Marlott, where he learns of the death of Tess's father. As he is trying to find out Tess, he discovers that nobody knew a Mrs. Clare, but they did know about Tess. Finally, he reaches at the place of Tess's mother, When he meets John, he finds his mother-in-law uncomfortable and hesitant to tell him where Tess has gone. When Angel asks whether Tess would want him to look for her, John does not give a very certain reply. However, Angel replies that he is sure that she would because he knows Tess better than her, to which she agrees. At last she takes pity on him and tells that Tess is in Sandbone. So now he gets the clue where she is. Dear students, here is some text that is about the meeting of Angel with the mother of Tess. It was plain that for some reason or other she had not wished him to visit her, and he felt his call to be somewhat of an intrusion. She came to the door herself, and the light from the evening sky fell upon her face. This was the first time that Claire had ever met her, but he was too preoccupied to observe more than that he was still a handsome woman in the garb of a respectable widow. He was obliged to explain that he was Tess's husband and his object in coming there, and he did it awkwardly enough. "I want to see her at once," he added. "You said you would write to me again, but you have not done so." "Because she have not come home," said John. "Do you know if she is well?" "I don't, but you ought to, sir," said she. "I admit it. Where is she staying?" From the beginning of the interview, John had disclosed her embarrassment by keeping her hand to the side of her cheek. "I don't know exactly where she's staying," she answered. "She was, but..." So she's hesitant to say something, to tell something. "Where was she?" "Well, she's not there now." In her evasiveness, she paused again, and the younger children had by this time crept to the door, where, pulling at his mother's skirts, the youngest murmured, "Is this the gentleman who is going to marry Tess?" The text continues. "He has married her," John whispered. "Go inside." Claire saw her efforts for reticence and asked, "Do you think Tess would wish me to try and find her? If not, of course, I don't think she would." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure she would not." He was turning away, and then he thought of Tess's tender letter. "I'm sure she would," he retorted passionately. "I know her better than you do." Well, the claim sounds to be very ironic in the context of what he has done to Tess, how he has left her. "That's very likely, sir, for I have never really known her." The regrets of a mother can be heard in her voice as she says this. "Please tell me her address, Mrs. Durbeyfield, in kindness to a lonely, wretched man." Tess's mother again restlessly swept her cheek with her vertical hand, and seeing that he suffered, she at last said in a low voice, "He is at Sandbone." "Ah, where there?" "Sandbone has become a large place, they say." So he wants to know exactly where in Sandbone. "I don't know more particularly than I have said. Sandbone. For myself, I was never there." So she has a limited information that she has passed on. It was apparent that John spoke the truth in this, and he pressed her no further. "Are you in want of anything?" he said gently. Again, his concern for Tess's family, and he, being a good human being, asks them if they need anything. "No, sir," she replied. "We are fairly well provided for." Without entering the house, Claire turned away. With this, we come to chapter 55. Angel reaches Sandbone, a fashionable village that had recently experienced tremendous growth. Considering the social status of Tess, he wonders where Tess could be amidst the wealth and fashion around him. Now, because Tess is a poor girl, and because he believes that she would be in a state of poverty, so he really wonders how she could be there, and in that environment, that was a kind of environment of wealth and fashion and of elitedom around him, he really couldn't think of Tess fitting into it properly. He asks the postman for the address of a Mrs. Clare and then a Miss Durbeyfield, but he does not know either. Again, it becomes very interesting that nobody knows her there with reference to Angel Clare, because she's not known as Mrs. Clare there. And when she's asked about in terms of her family name, Durbeyfield, when he asks about Miss Durbeyfield, again he comes to know that nobody with the name Miss Durbeyfield was there. However, interestingly, he comes to know that a D'Urberville is staying at an expensive lodging called the Herons. As Angel reaches there, he is impressed by its grandeur. He also wonders how Tess could possibly afford it. He believes that she must have sold his grandmother's diamonds to afford this place. It is very, very ironic here. As the text would move forward, you would see how ironic becomes this expectation of Angel. As the landlady comes, he asks her to inform Tess about the arrival of a relative, Angel. When Tess appears, she is dressed in expensive clothing. Angel pleads for her forgiveness and tells her that he has learned to accept her as she is. He also tells her that he desperately wants their reunion. Broken-hearted, Tess replies that it is too late. Thinking Angel would never come back for her, she gave in to Alec d'Urberville's desires and is now under his protection. So, the most awaited reunion of the two, as we come to that point, we see how tragic it is. Let us read some relevant text. Dear students, this selected part of the text is regarding the meeting between Angel and Tess. The hour being early, the landlady herself opened the door. Claire inquired for Tess d'Urberville or Derbyfield. Mrs. d'Urberville? Yes. Tess then passed as a married woman, and he felt glad, even though she had not adopted his name. Will you kindly tell her that a relative is anxious to see her? It is rather early. What name shall I give, sir? Angel. Mr. Angel? No, Angel. It is my Christian name. She'll understand. I'll see if she's awake. He was shown into the front room, the dining room, and looked out through the spring curtains at the little lawn and the rhododendrons and other shrubs upon it. Obviously, her position was by no means so bad as he had feared, and it crossed his mind that she must somehow had claimed and sold the jewels to attain it. He did not blame her for one moment. Soon his sharpened ear detected footsteps upon the stairs, at which his heart thumped so painfully that he could hardly stand firm. Dear me, what will she think of me, so altered as I am, he said to himself, and the door opened. Tess appeared on the threshold, not at all as he had expected to see her. Bewilderingly otherwise indeed. Her great natural beauty was, if not heightened, rendered more obvious by her attire. She was loosely wrapped in a cashmere dressing gown of grey-white, embroidered in half-mourning tints, and she wore slippers of the same hue. Her neck rose out of a frill of down, and her well-remembered cable of dark brown hair was partially coiled up in a mass at the back of her head and partly hanging on her shoulder, the evident result of haste. He had held out his arms, but they had fallen again to his sides, for she had not come forward, remaining still in the opening of the doorway. वहीं पर खड़ी हुई है वो. Mere yellow skeleton that he was now, he felt the contrast between them, the thought, his appearance distasteful to her. Tess, he said huskily, can you forgive me for going away? Can't you come to me? How do you get to be like this? It is too late, said she, her voice sounding hard through the room, her eyes shining unnaturally. I did not think rightly of you. I did not see you as you were. He continued to plead. I have learnt to since, dearest Tessie mine. Too late, she said, waving her hand in the impatience of a person whose tortures cause every instant to seem an hour. Don't come close to me, Angel. No, you must not. Keep away. But don't you love me, my dear wife? Because I have been so pulled down by illness. You are not so fickle. I am come on purpose for you. My mother and father will welcome you now. Yes, oh, yes, but I say it is too late. Abhi tak bhi Angel has not been able to understand what has happened. She seemed to feel like a fugitive in a dream who tries to move away but cannot. Don't you know all? Don't you know it? Yet how do you come here if you do not know? I inquired here and there and I found the way. I waited and waited for you, she went on, her tones suddenly resuming their old fluty pathos. But you did not come, and I wrote to you and you did not come. He kept on saying you would never come anymore, and that I was a foolish woman. He was very kind to me and to mother and to all of us after father's death. Here all this reference to he is a reference to Alec. I don't understand. He has won me back to him. Claire looked at her keenly, then gathering her meaning, flagged like one plague-stricken, and his glance sank. It fell on her hands, which once rosy were now white and more delicate. She continued, "He is upstairs. I hate him now because he told me a lie that you would not come again. And you have come. These clothes are what he's put upon me. I didn't care what he did with me. But will you go away, Angel, please, and never come anymore?" We can understand her pathetic condition. They stood fixed there, baffled hearts looking out of their eyes with a joylessness pitiful to see. Both seemed to implore something to shelter them from reality. "Ah, it is my fault," said Claire, but he could not get on. Speech was as inexpressive as silence, but he had a vague consciousness of one thing, though it was not clear to him till later, that his original Tess had spiritually ceased to recognize the body before him as hers, allowing it to drift like a corpus upon the current in a direction dissociated from its living will. A few instants passed, and he found that Tess was gone. His face grew colder and more shrunken as he stood concentrated on the moment, and a minute or two after he found himself in the street, walking along he did not know whither. So such miserable, such pathetic was the reunion of the two lovers. Coming towards some important discussion points of this chapter, I would like you to look at the contrast in the settings. The village of Sandbourne proves a stark contrast to the other regions in which Tess has lived so far. We have seen her at Flintcombe Ash, we have seen her at Alec's farmhouse, everywhere. Life was tough, life was harsh, life was bitter. Here it is a thriving and fashionable community, and its description foreshadows the later revelation of Tess's association with Alec. The appearance of Tess herself also resembles this area. She is more fashionable and is stylishly dressed. By the way, this is not he, this is she, a typo error this is. Angel's realization that Tess had not recognized the body before her as her husband parallels his earlier condemnation of Tess as a different woman in Tess's shape. In this situation, it is Tess who rejects Angel, for she cannot reconcile what she believes about her husband with the actual person in front of her. This brings us to chapter 56. The landlady, Mrs. Brooks, is curious about the conversation that goes on between Tess and Angel. She has heard fragments of the conversation between the two, then she hears Tess return to her room. So, out of curiosity, she follows Tess upstairs and spies on her through the keyhole. As she spies through the keyhole, she sees Tess holding her head in her hands, accusing Alec of deceiving her into thinking that Angel would never come back for her. The landlady is not able to hear the full conversation, so she can hear only a low sort of moaning as Tess sobs, and then hears fragments of a conversation between Alec and Tess in which she tells him that Angel has returned. Alec gets very angry on Tess. Mrs. Brooks is frightened by his anger and she runs away from the scene, goes back to her own room. She sees Tess go through the front gate where she disappears onto the street. Here is some part of the text that I find very, very relevant for us to explore. Mrs. Brooks knew that she would not emerge again for some time. She accordingly ascended the stairs softly and stood at the door of the front room, a drawing room connected with the room immediately behind it, which was a bedroom, by folding doors in the common manner. This first floor, containing Mrs. Brooks's best apartments, had been taken by the week by the D'Urbervilles. The back room was now in silence, but from the drawing room there came sounds. All that she could at first distinguish of them was one syllable: continually repeated in a low note of moaning, as if it came from a soul bound to some Luxurian wheel. Oh, oh, oh. Then a silence, then a heavy sigh, and again, oh, oh, oh. So she is lamenting. Tess is regretting. The landlady looked through the keyhole. Only a small space of the room inside was visible, but within that space came a corner of the breakfast table, which was already spread for the meal, and also a chair beside. Over the seat of the chair, Tess's face was bowed, her posture being a kneeling one in front of it. Her hands were clasped over her head. The skirts of her dressing gown and the embroidery of her nightgown flowed upon the floor behind her, and her stockingless feet, from which the slippers had fallen, protruded upon the carpet. It was from her lips that came the murmur of unspeakable despair. Then a man's voice from the adjoining bedroom. "What's the matter?" She didn't answer, but went on in a tone which was a soliloquy rather than an exclamation, and a dirge rather. So Tess is not interested in anything. She is not even interested in answering Alec, and she is just lamenting over her own grief. So it is more than, you see, even a soliloquy. It is an expression of grief. Mrs. Brooks could only catch a portion. "And then my dear, dear husband came home to me, and I didn't know it, and you had used your cruel persuasion upon me. You did not stop using it. No, you did not stop. My little sisters and brothers and my mother's needs, they were the things you moved me by, and you said my husband would never come back, never. And you taunted me and said what a simpleton I was to expect him. And at last I believed you and gave way, and then he came back. Now he's gone a second time, and I have lost him now forever. And he will not love me the littlest bit ever anymore, only hate me. Oh yes, I have lost him now, again, because of you." In writhing with her head on the chair, she turned her face towards the door, and Mrs. Brooks could see the pain upon it, and that her lips were bleeding from the clench of her teeth upon them, and that the long lashes of her closed eyes stuck in wet tags to her cheeks. She continued, "And he's dying, he looks as if he's dying, and my sin will kill him and not kill me. Oh, you have torn my life all to pieces, made me be what I prayed you in pity not to make me be again. My own true husband will never, never, oh God, I can't bear this, I cannot." So she is more talking to herself than to Alec, and she is blaming him for persuading and for tempting and for convincing her that Angel would never come back. She also, for the first time here, says that it is out of her love for her family, for her brothers and sisters and mother, that when in their name he persuaded her, she was a victim to that persuasion. There were more and sharper words from the man, then a sudden rustle. She had sprung to her feet. Mrs. Brooks, thinking that the speaker was coming to rush out of the door, hastily retreated down the stairs. She need not have done so, however, for the door of the sitting room was not opened, but Mrs. Brooks felt it unsafe to watch on the landing again, and entered her own parlour below. This brings us to chapter 57. What we see in this chapter is that after facing all the disgrace and after coming to know the reality, dejected and disgraced, Angel decides to leave on the first train. At his hotel, he finds a telegraph from his mother informing him that Cuthbert is going to marry Mercy Shant. Remember the woman the parents wanted Angel to marry. Rather than waiting for the train, Angel decides to walk to the next station and meet it there. As he is on his way to the next station, however, he sees Tess running after him. She tells him that she has killed Alec. Tess says she had to kill Alec because he wronged Angel, but that she also had to return to Alec because Angel abandoned her. She begs Angel's forgiveness. He also tells her that he loves her. He still does not believe she has actually killed Alec. He claims that he will protect her, and they walk toward the interior of the country, waiting for the search for Tess to be ended so that they can escape overseas. That evening they find an old mansion and slip in through the windows. After a woman comes to close up the house, Angel opens the shutters, and they are all alone there for the night. Well, here is some relevant text that I have selected. This is about Tess. She was so pale, so breathless, so quivering in every muscle that he did not ask her a single question, but seizing her hand and pulling it within his arm, he led her along. To avoid meeting any possible wayfarers, he left the high road and took a footpath under some fir trees. When they were deep among the moaning boughs, he stopped and looked at her inquiringly. "Angel," she said, as if waiting for this, "do you know what I have been running after you for? To tell you that I have killed him." A pitiful white smile lit her face as she spoke. "What?" said he, thinking from the strangeness of her manner that she was in some delirium. "I have done it. I don't know how," she continued. "Still I owed it to you and to myself, Angel. I feared long ago when I struck him on the mouth with my glove that I might do it someday for the trap he set for me in my simple youth, and his wrong to you through me. He has come between us and ruined us, and now he can never do it anymore. I never loved him at all, Angel, as I loved you. You know it, don't you? You believe it. You didn't come back to me and I was obliged to go back to him. Why did you go away? Why did you, when I loved you so? I can't think why you did it, but I don't blame you. Only, Angel, will you forgive me my sin against you? Now I have killed him. I thought as I ran along that you would be sure to forgive me. Now I have done that. It came to me as a shining light that I should get you back that way. I could not bear the loss of you any longer. You don't know how entirely I was unable to bear your not loving me. Say you do now. Dear, dear husband, say you do. Now I have killed him." And the text continues, I do love you, Tess. So he is reassuring. "I do love you, Tess. Oh, I do. It is all come back," he said, tightening his arms round her with fervid pressure. "But how do you mean you have killed him?" I mean that I have," she murmured in a reverie. What bodily? Is he dead?" "Yes, he heard me crying about you and he bitterly taunted me and called you by a foul name, and then I did it. My heart couldn't bear it. He had nagged me about you before, and then I dressed myself and came away to find you." By degrees he was inclined to believe that she had faintly attempted at least what she said she had done, and his horror at her impulse was mixed with amazement at the strength of her affection for himself and at the strangeness of its quality, which had apparently extinguished her moral sense altogether. Abhi bhi, he doesn't believe completely that she has killed Alec. With reference to this chapter, we as readers need to consider the following important points. Number 1, reconciliation. Number 2, apprehensions. Number 3, the inevitable end, the permanence of sin, and the theme of fate. Coming to these points one by one, I would say, as far as reconciliation of the lovers is concerned, it takes place in very, very strange circumstances. What we notice is that Tess has to kill Alec to meet Angel. This killing, this murder of Alec, it raises apprehensions. It raises apprehensions in our hearts as readers. What next? What would happen? And maybe as keen readers, we can foresee the inevitable end of all this. The permanence of sin is always there. It has always been there throughout the novel as a central theme. Hardy's philosophy of how when somebody sins is trapped up in that and has to bear the blob, the mark of this sin throughout, becomes again evident here, and it is this permanence of sin that does not leave Tess, and under the shadow of that sin, finally she turns into a murderer. The theme of fate. It is fate that delayed the arrival of Angel. It is the fate that the race between the arrival of Angel and the temptation of Alec went this way, that Alec's temptation won, and she, that is Tess, she gave in, and she out of her pressure, out of her sense of responsibility that she had towards her family, her siblings and her mother, that she gave in and she surrendered, she submitted herself to Alec. She loved Angel. We see Angel still loves her. Still, it is all a matter of fate that they could not meet each other before everything was ruined. This brings us to chapter 58, where we see that the two lovers seem to be in a state of perfect bliss. Tess tells Angel about how he carried her while sleepwalking, and he regrets that she did not tell him about this earlier, for he believes that it might have prevented much of their suffering. 5 days pass and Angel and Tess slowly lapse back into their original love. None of them mentions their estrangement. On one day, the woman who cleans the house discovers their hiding place, and before she comes back, Angel decides that this is a time to leave, and he asks Tess to be ready for departure. After a day of travel, they arrive in the evening at Stonehenge, where Tess feels quite at home. As she rests by a pillar, she says that she feels as if there are no people in the world but them. If you remember the previous reference that was made by Alec about he being the serpent and she being Eve in the paradise, now she is making that kind of a reference where he being Adam and she being Eve, as if there is nobody else around in this world. Tess knows that soon she is going to be caught, so she pleads Angel to look after Liza Lou when Tess is dead. Liza Lou is the younger sister of Tess, and again, out of sense of responsibility and her loyalty towards her family, she again is thinking about them. She asks Angel to marry Liza Lou, then asks her husband if he believes they will meet again after death, to which Angel does not have answer to. Soon Tess falls asleep. At dawn, Angel realizes that they are surrounded. Men are moving in from all sides, and Angel realizes Tess must truly have killed Alec. So for the first time, he realizes that actually she has killed Alec. Angel asks the men not to take Tess until she wakes up. When she sees them, she feels strangely relieved. She is glad that she will not live because she feels unworthy of Angel's love. She tells them that she is ready to go with them. Dear students, here is some text from chapter 58. In fact, this is the opening text of this chapter. The night was strangely solemn and still. In the small hours she whispered to him the whole story of how he had walked in his sleep with her in his arms across the Froome stream at the imminent risk of both their lives, and laid her down in the stone coffin at the ruined abbey. He had never known of that till now. Why didn't you tell me the next day? He said. It might have prevented much misunderstanding and woe. Don't think of what's past, said she. I'm not going to think outside of now. Why should we? Who knows what tomorrow has in store? But it apparently had no sorrow. The morning was wet and foggy, and Claire, rightly informed that the caretaker only opened the windows on fine days, ventured to creep out of their chamber and explore the house, leaving Tess asleep. There was no food on the premises, but there was water, and he took advantage of the fog to emerge from the mansion and fetch tea, bread and butter from a shop in a little place 2 miles beyond, as also a small tin kettle and spirit lamp, that they might get fire without smoke. His re-entry awoke her, and they breakfasted on what he had brought. So at this moment what we see is that they are in perfect bliss, and this bliss becomes quite ironic in the context where we know that that is Tess, she has killed her husband and she has come to Angel, and the danger is just surrounding. They were indisposed to stir abroad, and the day passed, and the night following, and the next and next, till almost without their being aware, 5 days had slipped by in absolute seclusion. Not a sight or sound of a human being disturbing their peacefulness, such as it was. The changes of the weather were their only events, the birds of the new forest their only company. But tacit consent they hardly once spoke. By tacit consent they hardly spoke of any incident of the past subsequent to their wedding day. The gloomy intervening time seemed to sink into chaos, over which the present and prior times closed as if it never had been. Whenever he suggested that they should leave their shelter and go forward towards Southampton or London, she showed a strange unwillingness to move. Why should we put an end to all that's sweet and lovely? On her part, we notice idealism. She deprecated, what must come will come. She knows she's going to be caught up, she's going to be sentenced to death, and she's ready for that. But she wants to enjoy the present moments of the company of her lover. And looking through the shutter chink, all is trouble outside there, inside here content. This is what she comments. Well, that was the opening text of that chapter. The whole chapter gives us details of their peaceful and blissful stay there, and this is the closing text of chapter 58, where the men who surrounded to catch her, these men are there to capture her, and as Angel notices that while Tess is asleep, he says, let her finish her sleep. He implored in a whisper of the men as they gathered around. When they saw where she lay, which they had not done till then, they showed no objection and stood watching her, as still as the pillars around. He went to the stone and bent over her, holding one poor little hand. Her breathing now was quick and small, like that of a lesser creature than a woman. All waited in the growing light, their faces and hands as if they were silvered, and the remainder of their figures dark. The stones glistening green-grey, the plain still a mass of shade. Soon the light was strong, and a ray shone upon her unconscious form, peering under her eyelids and waking her. What is it, Angel? She said, starting up. Have they come for me? Yes, dearest, he said, they have come. It is as it should be, she murmured. Angel, I am almost glad, yes, glad. This happiness could not have lasted. It was too much. I have had enough, and now I shall not live for you to despise me. She stood up, shook herself, and went forward. Neither of the men having moved. I am ready, she said quietly. She thinks she had her due share of the happiness, of the perfect bliss she could have in the company of her lover, Angel. Now she thinks she doesn't deserve any more of this. She is ready to surrender. She is ready to go quietly with these men. When we come to the discussion points related to this chapter, I would say that a brief period of happiness was there in the life of Tess and Angel, and they remain happily as husband and wife, yet this happiness is a nearly grotesque one, because the couple essentially has their honeymoon as they travel as fugitives. Both Tess and Angel know very well that this period of happiness is short-lived. Tess is ready for that. What is important is that despite the tragic conclusion to Tess Derbyfield's life, both Tess and Angel accept her fate with grace. This brings us to the last chapter of the novel, that is chapter 59, and let's see, dear students, what do we find here. Structurally, in terms of plot, in terms of story, the novel has already come to an end. This is just a neat closure that is given to the novel by Hardy. Tess is executed for her crime as justice is done, and fate has ended his sport with Tess, in the words of Hardy, president of the Immortals, that is, as Cillian phrase, had ended his sport with Tess. Sometime later, from a hillside outside Wintoncester, Angel and Lizaloo watch as a black flag is raised above the tower, indicating that Tess has been put to death. Angel and Lizaloo are motionless for a time, and then Angel Clare walks with Lizaloo, moving hand in hand. And this is the point where the novel comes to an end. This is the last part of the text that I would share from the novel. Let's see how in the abstraction of all this symbolic meaning that Hardy has conveyed at the end of the novel, he has actually conveyed his whole message. They had emerged upon this road through a narrow barred wicket in a high wall a little lower down. They here stand for Lizaloo and Angel. They seemed anxious to get out of the sight of the houses and of their kind, and this road appeared to offer the quickest means of doing so. Though they were young, they walked with bowed heads. With gait of grief, the sun's rays smiled on pitilessly. One of the pair was Angel Clare, the other a tall, budding creature, half girl, half woman, a spiritualized image of Tess. Slighter than she, but with the same beautiful eyes, Claire's sister-in-law, Lizalu. So here a comparison with Tess shows, it foreshadows that in future life, she would be taking the place of Tess in the life of Angel. Their pale faces seem to have shrunk to half their natural size. They moved on hand in hand and never spoke a word, the drooping of their heads being that of Giotto's two apostles. And this is the closing text of the novel. Against these far stretches of country rose, in front of the other city edifices, a large red bricking building with level grey roofs and rows of short barred windows bespeaking captivity, the whole contrasting greatly by its formalism with the quaint irregularities of the Gothic erections. It was somewhat disguised from the road in passing it by yews and evergreen oaks, but it was visible enough up here. The wicket from which the pair had lately emerged was in the wall of this structure. From the middle of the building, an ugly, flat-topped octagonal tower ascended against the east horizon. And viewed from this post on its shady side and against the light, it seemed the one blot on the city's beauty. So this is the prison. Yet it was with this blot and not with the beauty that the two gazers were concerned. Upon the cornice of the tower, a tall staff was fixed. Their eyes were riveted on it. A few minutes after the hour had struck, something moved slowly up the staff and extended itself upon the breeze. It was a black flag that was a symbol that the prisoner was sentenced to death, that Tess was dead. Justice was done, and the president of the immortals in Aeschylean phase had ended his sport with Tess. This is Hardy's comment on that as a narrator. And the D'Urberville knights and dames slept on in their tombs unknowing, the ancestors, ironically, who don't even know what has happened to one who is in the same line. The two speechless gazers bent themselves down to the earth as if in prayer, and remained thus a long time absolutely motionless. The flag continued to wave silently. As soon as they had strength, they arose, joined hands again, and went on. And this is the point, dear students, where the novel comes to an end. Here is a list of references and of materials that are used for the sessions, all the sessions actually that are designed for you for this novel, that is Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Here is a quick review of the session. We have finished phase 7, and thus we have completed the study and analysis of the novel. Giving overall comments on the novel, I would say real tragedy that Hardy's masterly pen has documented in such a beautiful way that it really touches the heart of the readers. We have seen how a simple, young, innocent, beautiful girl becomes a victim of her fate. Despite all her love that she has for her husband, she is unable to be in a position where she could live with her husband. Tortured, she is victimized by the sufferings of life. Some of them are brought by fate, some of them are brought by the agents of fate, I would say, people like Alec. She passes through all the tragedy with grace. However, tragically near the end, we see how she gives in to the temptation that is offered by Alec, and we see again the purpose is not to have something for herself. It is not for selfish ends. It is to support her family. And it is very interesting that this is the time point where Angel, the husband, the lover, comes back. Again, it is the courage of this young woman who kills Alec and goes back to this man. However, in terms of moral justice that is to be done, the end of the novel shows that she is with very much grace and with very much what I would say dignity, she accepts her fate and she is ready to surrender and submit to justice. She is killed, she is sentenced to death, and the black flag that is raised as a sign of she being sentenced to death remains there, moving on the air, showing the actually symbolizing her painful life. But in that context, under the shadow of that, what we see is Angel moves on as soon as he and Lizalu, the younger sister of Tess, who is going to take place maybe in the life of Angel, they move on, because this is the reality of life as Hardy presents it. No matter what happens, life keeps on going on. So it goes on for Angel and for the family of Tess. With these comments, I close the novel, since this was the last novel that we were supposed to cover in this course, I am actually closing the course here as well at this point. The course in itself was interesting in the sense that starting with the origin and development of novel, looking at what a novel as a genre is, what are its important characteristics, qualities and attributes, and then looking at different types of novels, tracing them through history. We started then exploring 4 selected novels. The first novel that we had in this course was Joseph Andrews by Henry Fielding. We did 2 more novels. One was Emma by Jane Austen and another was Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. And finally now the 4th novel that we have covered is Tess of D'Urberville, that is written by Thomas Hardy. I hope as we explored the text of these novels, we looked at the themes and the development of characters, and we saw how the plot was developed, it would have given you a fair enough idea of the development of the English novel in its early phases, and it would have given you a kind of critical eye to further explore more texts, more novels on your own. With this note, I close today's session. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.